All right, well, welcome everybody, and thanks so much for joining this session from the Walkley Foundation, which is looking at AI and data visualizations and web interactives. My name is Corinne Podger, and I look after programs and education here at the Foundation. This program is funded by the Walkley Public Fund, which is a tax-deductible fund that anyone can donate to. It's supporting this program and a parallel program that we're running at the moment on solutions journalism. I have tremendous pleasure in introducing our trainer for this session and our expert speaker. So the training will be led by Jan Oak, who is a data scientist and founder of a data journalism organization called Thibi, which is based in Singapore and Thailand, and he's joining us from Chiang Mai. Jan, do you want to just give us a couple of moments about what Thibi does?
Yeah, thanks, Corinne. So welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be here, and a lot of thanks to the Walkley Foundation for making this happen. I'm really glad that journalists are being able to use more AI tools and learn about these things. So the company that I founded 4 years ago, Thibi, we do a lot of work in Southeast Asia with journalists and media organizations and civil society organizations to allow them to use data in a way that makes them more able to use technologies that are very technical, but might not be so accessible for most people, especially in civil society and media organizations. There are not a lot of people who are the uber geeks of the world. So we fill in that space where we're the geeks for hire, and we are able to both speak the language of journalism and the language of tech. So we bridge those two worlds together and help them work with data and technology together.
Thanks so much. And later in this session, we'll be joined by Salcedo, who's a data scientist at Rappler in the Philippines. Dylan, would you like to tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at Rappler, which I'm sure most of us have heard of? Obviously, your CEO is Maria Ressa, who's a Nobel Prize-winning journalist, but we'd love to hear about what you're doing and the kind of work that you might be sharing with us later.
Yeah, thanks, Corinne. As a data scientist in Rappler, where I'm actually under the digital forensics. It's actually a new kind of group especially for a newsroom. We handle a lot of analysis and research about social media data and disinformation, and that's kind of like our specialization in our team right now. I'm actually very happy to share a lot of things we do later on in this lecture. Yeah, so stick around for that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Well, Jan, I might hand over to you. I'll just mention up front, I guess, that the way that I met Jan is through attending a number of trainings that he's run all over the world for brands like Reuters. Absolutely one of my favorite data journalism trainers. And so really absolutely thrilled that you're able to lead this session for us. So over to you.
Thanks, Corinne. So yeah, welcome everybody. Let me just start by sharing the screen.
Oh, just before you, as you're setting that up, Jan, I'll just mention, folks, we would love it if you introduce yourselves using the chat box, and you can also post questions in the chat box. It's set up so that everybody can see everybody. We tend to feel that that's a better space to post both your questions and also let us know who you are, where you're joining from, etc., than the Q&A box. So just use the chat box. I'll keep an eye on it throughout the session. Right, over to you, Jan.
Great. Thanks, Corinne. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, let's start. We have quite a packed agenda for this next 90 minutes. So let me just jump right in. So as we were saying, I'm the founder of this consultancy called Thibi. We work in all over the region, Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific, working on a lot of work with data and technology, focusing on the media and civil society space. And for today's session, I'll be giving a very short, condensed intro for using AI for visualizing data and doing some coding for the web, but not so much coding for data or developing applications and such, but doing short little things that you might already be doing with things like WordPress and being able to do that in a way where it's much faster with the current AI tools that are out there. So the agenda for today is to first start off with looking at how AI fits into the data visualization process, because when we talk about data visualization, most people are familiar with or what they see at the as the end product, the pretty visuals, the colorful charts, the animated graphs. But there are a lot of steps that go into it. So we'll be looking at all the different steps and looking particularly at where AI can help. And then right after that, we jump into each of the steps in which AI can help. And the first is looking at when you're at the stage of having a raw data set and being able to get from a dirty data set, which with maybe mistakes, things that are incomplete, and so on and so forth, into a data set that you can start using in your visualizations. We're also looking at how AI can be used to augment the data that you already have, so that you can have a more fully featured data set from a data set that it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that you want. And then we're looking at how you can use AI tools to reshape the data, because when you're creating charts, so if you guys have created data visualizations before using tools like Flourish or Tableau or something like that, you know that fitting the data in the correct shape is one of the biggest challenges for data visualizations. But with AI tools, that can be done quite easily with what's out there. And lastly, once we've covered a bit of creating data visualizations, I'm going to go into how you can use AI tools to write code and do very, very simple, basic web development. And then I'll hand it over to Dylan, where he's going to talk about the project that he ran alongside his colleagues at Rappler, which when I first saw in last year, I was blown away. And I thought, when I knew that I was doing this webinar, I thought, definitely Dylan and his team would be someone that we want to invite. Yeah, so the speakers once again. So my name is Jan, and then Dylan will be talking at the end of the session. Great. So like I was saying before, when we're looking at data visualization, we have to look at where AI fits into the whole process, right? And when we look at the process of data visualization, you can divide it up into several modular pieces that all fit together. And they all kind of follow a step-by-step order. So I've kind of had them here on this slide in a jumbled way. So we have clean, present, verify, analyze, define, etc., etc. And I'll leave this on the slide for about 30 seconds. So you can try to have a think about how these different parts might fit together, right? So what will be the first step that you take? What will be the step that you take after that? And then how do you get to, what is the final step, and how do you get there, right? So I'll just leave this on for about 30 minutes so you can have a think about it before I show you the answer. And in the meantime, let me check the chat. And when I'm sharing the screen, can you just see the slides, or everything on my screen right now?
Right now we can see just the slides, and
just slides, great.
Yeah, and I'm happy to keep an eye on the chat box for you.
Great. Okay. Cool. So another 20 seconds. Yeah, welcome everyone. Oh, we have people coming from Kathmandu. Right. So yeah, on to the next slide, where we talk about how these things fit together. So this is what we call in our data journalism profession the data pipeline. And the idea of a data pipeline exists in lots of different contexts, in lots of people's different fields working with data. Everyone who works with data has some sort of a data pipeline where you're going from the raw materials to the final product, right? So this particular process was created by an organization called the School of Data. Um, and they were active for about 10 years, trying to encourage organizations all over the world to use data. And they were focused on data literacy training all over the world. And I was working with them for a few years in the early 2020s. And so let's look at this process, right? So if you kind of had a thought about how the pieces fit together, so this is how they fit together, right? So first you have the question mark icon, which is defined, right? So first you have to ask a question that can possibly be answered by the data. So before you start looking at the possible data that you can be analyzing, you have to start with a question, right? It's very similar to the scientific process where you have to start with a hypothesis, and then you go and find the data to test your hypothesis, right? So after you have the question about what you want to ask the data, then you go and find the sources of the data. And this can be, just an online search. It could be looking at real world sources. It could be filing a Freedom of Information request, et cetera, et cetera. And then what you have to do after that is get the data from wherever that source is. It might be a website, it might be a report, it might be a government office, onto your computer or onto some place where you can manipulate, analyze, and do what you want with it, right? So that is the get step. Then once you get the data, before you kind of sink a lot of time and effort into the data, you have to make sure that the data is of good quality. So that is where the verify step comes in. There are lots of different methods to do it, but for the sake of brevity, I'll just say you have to. It's something that journalists do all the time, so you get what I mean. So once you have verified that it is of good quality, then you proceed to clean the data so that you can get it from the original format into a format that you can start asking the questions with, right? And then the penultimate step is to analyze the data, where you go back to the question that you had in the beginning and do calculations on the data, statistical analysis, maybe some machine learning to find the answers to that you originally had, right? And once you answered those questions, you have an audience that you want to show your answers to, and that is where the final stage of present comes in. And presenting your answers can be in the form of a data visualization. It can be in the form of text. It can be in the form of audio. You might put it on a podcast. So even though my specialty is in data visualization, I think when you're talking about how you're telling stories of data, you have to look at all the different formats and all the different ways in which you can tell stories with data and present the answers that you found. Okay, so now that we know all these steps, one myth that I want to debunk is the idea that data visualization just consists of the design process of creating the pretty pictures at the end. So I'm sure you've seen in a lot of major newsrooms like the New York Times or the Washington Post. They have a lot of really cool data visualizations in a lot of their articles. It's pretty mainstream now. A lot of newsrooms all over the world employ data visualizations. But the part of visualizing the data, designing the thing that your audience sees, is just the tip of the iceberg. It's all these prior steps that we were talking about before that are that have to be done to get to the visualization stage. Okay, so now that we know all these steps, let's look at where AI fits in, right? And as you all know, AI is rapidly advancing. And just this Monday, OpenAI announced its newest version of ChatGPT using the new model called GPT-4 Omni, I believe. And now you can talk to it like it's your friend. It's very creepy to me. So if you have watched the movie Her with Scarlett Johansson and Joaquin Phoenix, it's approaching that level of uncanniness, I believe. And so this was just in a matter of months, where I was coming up with the materials for this session just a couple of weeks ago, and then lo and behold, a few days before the webinar, you have a game-changing version that's released, right? So this is all something where if I'm going to be giving the same webinar a year from now, I think everything has to be redone from scratch because things would have changed so much. But as of now, to the best of my limited knowledge, these are the steps in which AI is the most useful, right? So scraping data, right? So one of the most tedious tasks that anyone working with data has to face is getting the data from whatever source onto your computer or onto some platform that you can use. So getting data out of a PDF file, scraping data from hundreds and hundreds of different pages of the website, getting data from something like an API where if you don't know how to code, it's very hard to be able to get and manipulate the data. So with AI tools, scraping data can be done much more easily. And you can use the regular tools like ChatGPT to do basic things, and then there'll be more specialized tools to do things on a more industrial scale, so to speak. Cleaning data has also gotten way easier. I'll be demoing how you can get from a messy data set to a clean data set by just chatting with it and asking it to do stuff just like you would an intern. And it's pretty neat what it can do, right? And of course, analysis, right? So if you want to, calculate stuff, you want to use some sort of statistical methods that are difficult to come up with on your own. All of the analysis that you need to do can also be assisted with AI, right? And of course, at the end, when you want to present your results, AI tools can create the visuals that you need with some limitations right now. Okay, great. So next up, I wanted to show you kind of like what are the tools that we'll be using. Of course, there are lots of different tools that are out there. ChatGPT, as everyone I think already uses, is the most famous one. And to me, I think there's not so much difference in the kind of state-of-the-art models out there that you need to venture outside of ChatGPT to do the basic stuff. So just use ChatGPT. Even just using that one tool, there's a big, really deep rabbit hole that you can go into. And then I will also be showing demos of tools that use ChatGPT in the background, or the GPT models in the background. So one is GPT for Sheets, where you have the power of GPT directly included into Google Sheets. So the work that you do with spreadsheets is a lot faster and a lot easier. And then for coders or people who want to try out coding, GitHub Copilot, which uses an AI assistant to help you write code. Okay. And before we jump into the nitty-gritty, I wanted to give you some examples of how I use all these tools in the day-to-day work myself and also with my team. So one of the projects that we did just a couple of months ago was this website for an organization that's tracking illicit trade of wild animals. And one of the things that we're doing with it is coming up with a data dashboard. And one of the things that we needed for a data dashboard when we are starting out the project was a mock data set, right? A data set that closely resembled the final data set in form, but uses fake data. So we were able to use ChatGPT with some clever prompting to come up with a data set that looks very similar to what an actual real-life data set would look like. So another is this data story that we created for a publication based out of Singapore called Continentalist. And this is about, so I'm from Myanmar originally, and one of the sort of like cultural touchstones that we have is that a lot of musicians in our country copy songs from other artists all over the world. So for example, you'll have an artist whose album is full of Bon Jovi covers way back in the day. And one thing we wanted to do was tell the data story with that data. And in order to look for that data, we looked far and wide, and we found that there were a lot of people on Facebook who had these volunteer Facebook groups where they were crowdsourcing all this information about this song by this Burmese artist is actually a cover of this other artist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as you can see, the data looks very messy. So people were just writing stuff on Facebook posts, right? So this is partly in Burmese and partly in English. I don't know if you guys are old enough to know about Michael Learns to Rock. It's if you're anyone from Asia, that's a band that you grew up with in the 90s. Or Phil Collins. So this is a very old album. And so you have all this kind of like messy text that we fed into also ChatGPT to get much more kind of structured data out of it. And then we use that to do the story. And when Corin shares all the slides, you can read the whole thing as well. So, and this story just won the WAN-IFRA Asia Awards for best data visualizations for a small newsroom. So we were quite proud of the work that we did. So we combined a lot of illustrations and data, and this is the data set with all the albums and all the songs in each of the albums. So if you click on each one of them, you have the track list. And so it was a lot of work putting it all together, but it was worth it because we got a cool story at the end. Right. So the other thing that we often do is taking a data set and reshaping it into a format that we can analyze or easily visualize. So this one is for a project that we're doing about visualizing data on the energy transition in Asia from fossil fuel heavy to renewable energy heavy. And I got this screenshot of a table in a report talking about which banks are financing these investments in renewable energy. So I just took a screenshot of it, put it into ChatGPT to ask it to give us a clean data set. And then from there, I just plopped it into a tool like Flourish to give me the chart that you see here. So always handy to do that. Next is when I was preparing this this webinar, I kind of played around with directly creating charts right from ChatGPT. And it was able to do that quite cleverly as well. So I just gave it another screenshot of a table, this time about overseas development assistance from Australia. I just went to the government website to get this table. And then I told it to create a particular type of chart, a stacked area chart, going to different regions of the world, West Asia, Africa, Caribbean, etc. And then, a few seconds later, I got this chart, which looks pretty good. I would change around the colors and stuff like that. But if you just want something that is a rough draft to kind of just see what the data looks like, it's definitely good enough. Yep. Okay, so let's jump into it. Before that, let me just, any questions in the chat?
No, everyone, I
Yep.
think, is just enjoying the session. So, yep, all
Great.
good.
Okay, sounds great. So cleaning a data set. So, we follow the data pipeline, and let's say you've gotten your data set and you want to take it from a format that, is published, which, is formatted according to what the publisher thinks is a useful format, to a format that is useful for you when you're doing your analysis and the visualization work. Okay, so let me show you the data set that I looked at. So this is from the Australian government, looking at overseas development assistance to all the countries in the world, right? So this is, I'm opening this up in Excel. I have all these different tabs in here. So this, okay, let me just make it bigger. So this is for the Pacific. This is for countries in South and Southeast Asia. So we're using data from this tab. And as you can see, all the data is there, but it's all quite messy. I don't know what this row of titles is doing here. There's this banner that I definitely don't need to worry about. And instead of a neat data set where you have just the header and the data below it, you have all these different metadata fields also included in the data set, right? And there's also these totals here that I don't really need. What else? So the formats of the years are kind of inconsistent. I know they put it this way for it to be easier to read, but if you want to plop it into a tool that's making a chart, it's not really the best way that it can comprehend it. What else is so there's also this footnotes here. So these footnotes, of course, are helpful when you're reading through that as a human, but when you plop it into a computer, it doesn't know what to do with it. So let's try to clean this, right? Let's try to clean this. So what I did, and I'm glad that people are able to use the most advanced model now from ChatGPT as of this week, because in the past, if you want to upload files onto ChatGPT, you'll have to pay the, I think, $20 per month fee. But now with GPT-4 Omni, all of that is built in, available for free. So even if you don't have a ChatGPT paid account, you can do all of this and follow along as well. So what I did was I opened up our wonderful tool, and I this. So now that I'm doing a bunch of demos, I'll be kind of going back and forth between.
Yep, that makes good sense. I think it's I know if you need to open different tabs at the top there, Jan, just keep the screen looking like that. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So here's now it's down here, and let me put my slides right next to it so I can switch back. So what I did, let me see. Can everyone see?
Yep, can see it perfectly.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So I uploaded the file, and then I asked it to extract the data from the Southeast and East Asia tab. And I also told it right away to condense all the rows information into one header row. So it gave me a summary of what it did, and then it gave me this data set right off the bat, right? So that looks, very good for first pass, but I also wanted it to do a bunch of other things as well. So for example, all the headers here have this thing called Australian ODA, and then the country name. So I wanted it to kind of remove that. There's this additional row for the number of observations, which we don't need because we just want the data on the funding. So I went in row by row and said, please remove the number of observation columns. It did that. I asked it to clean up the titles by removing the Australian ODA. I did that. I asked it to split the year from between the original start year and the end year. And then after that, change the year to a 4-digit year format. The total column on the right, that was removed. And there's a little bit more cleaning on the names of the countries, etc. Yeah, a little bit more cleaning on the names of the countries here. And then it gave me a CSV version of the data set, and it gave me a link. I click on it and I download the file, and there it was, a clean data set, right? In the space of maybe 15 minutes or less, I was able to get the clean data set that I wanted. Of course, I could have done it myself on Google Sheets, but if that will be error prone, and it would definitely have taken me more than that amount of time.
Just before you go on, Jan, there's a couple of questions. One of which we it speaks to more of the design element of the visualizations later on, but let's touch on them both. The first one is a design question. Can you use prompts with ChatGPT to better control color choices in visualizations? For example, could you say, could you nominate hex color numbers?
Definitely, yeah. So you can go into, when you're creating a chart, you can say, use these colors. and it is smart enough to know different types of color encoding. So if you prefer hex, then you can use your hex codes. If you prefer something like HSL, you can do that. You can just give it color names as well, and then it'll probably figure that out too.
Excellent. I'm sure there's a little silent yay in the chat box. And then the other question is, what about copyright and data privacy issues with using ChatGPT for visualizations?
Yeah, so that is a tricky situation. So I guess I'm lucky in my work that most of the work that we do with data is with journalists, and they're using either public data or data that they have sourced that they are able to use. But if you're using data from your own organization that is not publicly published, then I think it's something that gets into murky territory, and you probably should check with your organization's policies. And I think there's definitely a lot of things that you ought to be worried about, especially if it's private data, because you shouldn't even be kind of uploading that onto somewhere on the internet to begin with, if it contains private data. And secondly, all these AI companies have vague policies around what they do with the data. And they will always say, we'll track this and that for quote unquote research purposes. But at the end of the day, we're not really sure what is going to happen with the data, right? And as you know, a lot of these giant tech companies have had a lot of problems with not taking people's privacy concerns seriously. So definitely do that with a note of caution.
Wonderful. And just while we're in this section looking at cleaning a data set, there's a question that speaks specifically to this. How likely is ChatGPT to introduce incorrect data or produce errors and mistakes that would be hard to notice?
Yeah, so that's another thing. That's why I would say, because this data set that we're currently working with is small enough that I can see it all in one page, right? So that's why I'm comfortable using this tool to do it. If I'm dealing with a data set that has maybe thousands of rows, and it also has data that I wouldn't be able to like check right off the bat, I probably wouldn't do it. I'll ask it to kind of help me to write code to be able to copy and paste into a code editor to clean it myself. But I wouldn't ask it to do the cleaning straight away, because you're completely right. It still makes a lot of mistakes. I mean, right when ChatGPT came out, it was famous for hallucinations and making mistakes, and they still definitely have not dealt with that problem, right? And I think, I mean, opinions differ, but I think that problem is going to be around for a long time in various guises.
Thanks so much. And I know that we'll talk more about some of the caution advice that you have later in the session. So let's go back to the presentation, and I'll continue to keep an eye on the chat.
Right. So this is just kind of a screenshot of all the prompts I put in to clean the data set. And this is how the final data set looks like. And what I did after that was take this data set, downloaded the CSV file that it gave me, and plopped it into my favorite data visualization tool called Flourish. So maybe if you use Flourish already in your work, you can pop into the chat and say you're either a fan of Flourish or a super fan. I think those are the only two variations for Flourish, because it's such a awesome tool. And so what I did was I took the data, and all I did was pasted it in the data segment of the editor for Flourish. And there you have it, a nice little bar chart race for looking at Australia's overseas development assistance to countries in East and Southeast Asia and how it's changed over time. I particularly chose this chart type because it just shows that you can do some fancy animation with the data that comes out of ChatGPT and a tool like Flourish, even though I think this particular chart type is definitely overused. So visualization professionals won't recommend this kind of bar chart race, but people really like it. So always a crowd pleaser. yeah, so you can do all this stuff, which if you did it manually, might take the better part of a day. But if you're using ChatGPT to help you with all the steps, you can probably do that in the space of half an hour. So this is the same chart. It's like having a lot of very smart interns working for you in parallel. Okay, so what I did for data cleaning was doing the steps directly in ChatGPT by talking to it through the chat interface. But there are a lot of tools out there which lets you take ChatGPT and put it directly into your spreadsheet tool. So let me show you an example of that. So there are a lot of them out there, but GPT for Sheets is one that I use. And I'll show you what I did here. So this is the data set that I created from scratch just using prompts. So it's reloading it. So what I have here, if you look at this formula here, I use this formula called GPT list, which is you have to install this plugin, this extension. So you have GPT Sheets for GPT for Sheets and Docs. And once you have that, you get access to a bunch of new formulas in Google Sheets, or if you're doing this in Excel, they have a version for Excel as well. And I just said, list out all the countries in Southeast Asia alphabetically, and it did that. So all the 11 countries in Southeast Asia are here. And then I said, okay, take the countries in the first column and give me the names of the capitals. And so it did that as well. And the next step, let's say I want to kind of create a simple map with the locations of all the capitals. I would need their latitudes and longitudes, their GPS coordinates. So I asked the tool to do that. So I said, okay, give me the latitude for the city. And then I pointed to the cell that contained the name of the city. And I did the same for longitude. And then I have all the data that I need to create a map. Right? So all of this could be done in the matter of 5 minutes. Whereas before, I would have had to, find a data set which had the list of countries and the capitals, maybe get it from like the World Bank or something. Of course, for the countries in my region, I know what they are. And then do some fancy thing like VLOOKUP. And then next, I will have to get another data set that had data about longitudes and latitudes, maybe even have to mess around with a tool like a GIS tool like QGIS, and then get all the longitude and latitude data, do another lookup to join it. But here, I can just ask it to do what I want to do. And here, the word of caution that we were talking about just now is even more amplified because I have this data set, but until I plop it onto a real map, I don't know if the latitudes and longitudes are correct or it just made stuff up, right? So always with a word of caution, but it definitely helps you quite a bit. Okay, so that's GPT for Sheets. And of course, the main advantage here is you can integrate all the prompts that you'll be using to type in into the chat interface right into your spreadsheet software. So you can use one cell and have a prompt that refers to the other cell and have this chain of things that you're asking it to do without having to have a long back and forth conversation with it. Yeah, so that's always very handy. So if you work a lot with spreadsheets, I definitely recommend checking this out. Okay, so next, reshaping and augmenting data. So let's go back to the data set that we just cleaned, right? So what I did now was I said, okay, maybe I want to create a chart that is just for the latest year in the data set, right? So I said, okay, take the data from the last row in the data set. So here we are. Okay, so this is the same spreadsheet open up in Google Sheets. And then I wanted it to just take this data set from 2022 and 2023 And so this is in the form of a row, right? And then we have the country names up top. And I wanted it to just take this row and make it into a column, right? So this is reshaping data. So I did that. I asked it to take just the data for 2022 and reshape the data so that the countries are the rows and the amount of aid is in one column. So it did that for me. So I got these two columns for the country and the aid amount. So that's very useful. Of course, this is a very simple thing. So, you can just do a copy and paste and transpose in Google Sheets and it will do the same thing. But this is just for demonstrative purposes, right? If you have a much larger data set that you want to do something like stack or melt or even pivot, all of these things can be done on ChatGPT as well. And in addition to that, I wanted to do what I did with the other demo, was to augment the data by creating additional data based on the data that I already have, right? So I said, add 2 columns for latitude and longitude and put in the latitudes and longitudes of the centroids of these countries, right? So for each country, it looked at, what is the center point of that country, and then gave me the latitude and the longitude. So at this point, I was impressed, but also skeptical, right? So it gave me a bunch of numbers for the latitudes and longitudes, but I don't know if it's doing it correctly, right? So what I did was, just like I did before, took that data set in a CSV and plopped it into a map in Flourish. And from what I can see, it looks quite accurate, right? We're looking at the countries in Southeast Asia. So this is, so this is Yangon in around in Myanmar. This is near, this is in Laos. This is in Vietnam. This is Cambodia. This is the Philippines. And we have Timor-Leste and Indonesia, right? So it messed up a little bit, right? So for some countries, it gave me the center of the country. And for other countries, it gave me, I think, the center of the largest city or something like that. Because for my country, Myanmar, the center, if it's calculated correctly, should be further up north, and so on and so forth. And for Vietnam, if you look at what is the center of the country, probably is something further up north as well. So if you want to explore data and kind of like get some simple analysis out of it, it's doing a pretty good job. Okay. And I can show you how it looks like in Flourish. So once again, I took the data set that ChatGPT gave me, and I just points. And I plopped it into the data section here. This is exactly the same data that I was showing you just now in the screenshot. And then I looked at the preview and fiddled around here with some of the things for the design. Of course, this is very, very basic map. It has no titles, no labels, no legend, nothing. So it's just for me to test if the data looks sensible, right? And also it scaled the dots to the size of the development assistance, right? So we can see from here that in 2022, Australia gave the most aid to Indonesia out of the countries in Southeast Asia. Right. So back to our slides. Okay, so next, I wanted to see if I can, instead of going through all the different steps of the data pipeline, I can give it a raw data set and ask it directly to give me a chart, right? So what I did was I screenshotted this piece of information, this table from one of the Australian government websites. Link is down here. And then I said, okay, make a stacked area chart of ODA funding going to different regions of the world that you can see in this table. And then it gave me that, right? So as some of you were asking, it kind of chose a pretty default color palette. But if I expanded this prompt and gave it particular hex code or particular, even something like a particular theme, right? If I say make it grayscale or make it have bright colors or make it pastel colors. I'm sure it will do what I asked it to do. I can try it out here. So scrolling down to my prompts. Oh. Okay, let me create a new one. So here was my table. Okay.
It's so interesting watching this happening in real time.
Yep, so let's see what it does.
That it's quite quick. Like it feels like a while because it's a webinar, but it is in fact very, very quick. Just while it's doing the analyzing, one of the questions that came up, one of the questions that came up in the chat was, do you feel that there are different kinds of visualizations that are perhaps overused? So,
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, we can have a whole. So when I do data visualization training, I do a lot of sessions on design, and a lot of them, some of them is like what chart type to use and what chart types not to use, right? And yeah, so for example, pie charts are definitely overused. That's always culprit number one. People use pie charts quite a bit, and they're usually very easy to mess up because usually the data that you have is not in the form of that is conducive to a pie chart. Okay, so it did something, and this time is complete nonsense. I don't know what it was doing. So I did get a stacked bar chart, but it seemed to be starting at so I see what it did. Because it's grayscale, it's not nonsense. Sorry, ChatGPT. What it was doing was the colors that it chose, because I told it to do grayscale. The first color block that it chose was completely white, so you don't see the first block. So let me try to, yeah, if I can just change it to pastel colors. Right. So while it's doing that, if there are no more questions, let's go back to the slides. Oh, there you go. Right. So yeah, very fast and pretty reliable. Okay, so now that we covered the part about creating visualizations, let's move on to maybe a little bit more technical stuff. So maybe in the chat, you can, if you write code, maybe not for a living, but if you write code once in a while to kind of like tweak some things on a website or tweak some things on WordPress, please do a shout out in the chat. If you have an app that you built or something like that, or a website with some JavaScript that you have, then please share a link or something. That would be wonderful to look at. Right. So before we look at actually writing code, some things to note when you're asking AI to write code, and this kind of applies for a lot of different things, but particularly for technical things where you might it might look like it's doing the right thing, but it might also be making mistakes. Right. So rule number one, like I was saying for the data sets, writing code with AI is best for small and well-defined tasks, right? So you have to do the thinking of how to take your big coding challenge, and break it up into small bite-sized chunks, and then give it to ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot or whatever AI tool you're using to do the small task, and then you are the one who have to be combining all that together with writing your own code as well to make sure that it all works together. Number two, if you can't understand the code that it wrote, don't use it, right? Because sometimes if it's something simple, you can just visually check if it did the right thing. So for example, you're asking it to, let's say, create a button that has a certain color, right? So you can see that whether or not it created the button according to what you asked, or didn't do that. But if you're using it to write, an entire application, which it will attempt if you ask it to do, then you might have code that the AI wrote that seems to work, but you don't really know whether it actually is working, or some gnarly bug will come along when you've deployed it to production and your actual users are using it. And tip number 3, test thoroughly, right? Testing your code is just good practice in general for any kind of coding task, but you have to really test thoroughly to make sure that it's both writing code that is accurate for the task that you're doing and is also efficient, right? Because when you're writing code, there's definitely ways to make it so that the computer is taking a long time to do it versus the computer taking a short time to do it. And the AI will optimize for something that is just functional, and it doesn't have enough depth of thinking to be able to make write code that is doing the task as efficiently as possible, right? And the good news with this is that you can ask the AI to write the test for you, and then you can test it with the code that is written. So lots of different ways that you can use AI. But yeah, always be careful, and always you should be in the driver's seat. It is the co-pilot, right? Think of the AI as a really brilliant intern who never sleeps. And just like you would treat any intern, they can be very useful, but you always have to be on top of what they're doing. Okay. Right, so WordPress plugin. So this is fun because I'm not a big WordPress guy, but I know that especially in media, people use WordPress quite a lot. So all of the stuff that I did to prepare, I asked ChatGPT to teach me. So I asked ChatGPT how to write the code that I need. I asked it to help me create a WordPress plugin, give me the step-by-step instructions to create a WordPress plugin. And I also kind of used the data that I created for the earlier parts of this webinar to create the plugin that I'm about to show you, right? So I have the data that we were looking at just now, right? So I said, okay, let's, what's the simplest version of a WordPress plugin that I can create, right? So I said, okay, use the data about Australia's ODA to Southeast and East Asian countries and come up with multiple choice tests to test people's knowledge of it, right? So it came up with a test. It came up with these little prompts here, these little questions here, right? What is, and it's quite clever. It's like, which country received the highest amount of ODA? And if you're like a teacher or something, I think that would be very useful. So gave a list of questions, which country did not receive, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And then I said, okay, let's take this one step further, right? Now that I have this in a question and answer format in text, I can ask it to say, hey, create a simple WordPress plugin that asks the users these questions and presents buttons for different multiple choice answers. And then when the user clicks on the correct one, it should display correct answer. And when the user clicks on the wrong one, it should display wrong answer, try again, right? So that's all I asked it to do. And lo and behold, it gave me what you're about to see. Yeah. Oh.
I think it's just a big image. As in, it's scrolling weird because it's very large. There we go. Yeah.
Okay. So yep. So these are the prompts, right? So this is what it gave me when I asked it to give me the quiz questions, and then I said the thing I said just now, and then it gave me step-by-step instructions, right? Note I've never messed around with WordPress too much before, so I said, "Oh, give me instructions," and it said, "Okay, set up the plugin direct." It told me to create this directory, create this file, name this file the following thing. open up a code editor, plop in this code, and I know enough about coding to know that is doing the right thing. So it gave me a little snippet here that kind of takes the text of what it produced, and then it has a little thing that says if I click on this, and if the correct answer is this, then do this, etc., and wrote a little function that does that. And then I took it and I just plugged it into where it asked me to plug it in. So I have this little thing called, this is my code editor online. I use this really wonderful tool called InstaWP. So it creates a WordPress instance from scratch. It's free, so it's really nice to test out little things that you want to try with WordPress. And then I just took its instructions. It says go to the plugins folder, create a new folder, create a new file with this name, and I pasted the code in. And then it even tells me how I can use it, right? So it says, so the PHP part handles a shortcode setup, make it easy to use to include the code quiz anywhere. So you go to anywhere in your site and just say in square brackets ODA_quiz, and then you have it. So that's what I did. So I have a hello world post in my kind of sandbox setup. And all I did was plop in this text here. And then if you go to the published version, here's my little quiz. And then if I click on it, and if I get the wrong answer, it tells me that it's wrong. And then if I get the correct answer, it tells me that's correct. And so not only did it write code for me, it told me how to deploy it in an environment that I know very little about, right? The good thing, at least for me, is that I've been coding for many years. So even though it's an environment that I'm not familiar with, I know enough to be able to know if it's doing the right thing or not doing the right thing, right? But there's a lot of the other things that are gaps in my knowledge that it filled in for me. Right, so there you go. Now you know how to make WordPress plugins.
That looks
And
great.
you don't, yeah, I was so excited about it. Okay, so next, we can go one step further and ask it to help us write code. And when I say it, it's GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot is a tool from Microsoft that connects with a code editor and lets you write code together with it. So you type in comments and then it creates code based on those comments, right? So we have a few minutes and that's all we need. So if you guys, oops, sorry. So if any of you write code, you'll be familiar with the idea of a code editor, right? So yeah, so all I did was write down little things like this. Let's say a function to take a date and return another date X number of days in the future. So I was thinking like, what would be a very simple web application to write? And I was thinking, okay, what about something that takes a date and sometimes you think, okay, what is 100 days from now? Let's say you're doing like I don't know, a challenge to work out for 100 days in a row at the gym. And you say, okay, if I start today, how many days is 100 days in the future, right? So why don't you write a little web application that does that, right? So that was my idea. And then I just gave it these prompts. And then it created this little web app for me that I'm running right now. There we go. Yeah, so here it is. So let's say this is the 16th of May. And then I want to go to 100 days in the future. And yeah, 100 days from now is the 24th of August, 2024, right? So I can show you how it works in the code editor. So I'm just going to create a new file. So this is HTML and JavaScript. So I'm just going to say test.html, create a new thing. And I'm getting a blank screen, right? So I'm going to say I'm too lazy to type out all the boilerplate. So give me a boilerplate HTML page. And gives me all of that. So I'm going to go back in. Yep, I accept. Going to put in some script tags. So if you have done a bit of JavaScript before, this is where well, it's telling me what I want to do already. So this is the function, and is creating once I typed in the little comment, it gave me the code. So now I can go in here and say, okay, I want to create a form that takes and it even predicts your prompt. So it's like, okay, this is probably what you want me to do now. So I say, okay, yes, that's what I want you to do. And yeah, that's what it gives me. So it forgot a little thing. So I'm going to close the form, and it also gave me this thing that is not necessary. So I'm going to delete it. So now I have a form, and now I want to display the result. And then it gives me this thing that displays the result. And yeah, if I run this same file on here, so instead of the index file, I go to test.html. Yep, it gives me the same thing. So it has these things that I should actually comment out. And there you go. It does the exact same thing. So let's say 20 days from tomorrow is the 6th of June. Yeah, so there you go. So
that's wonderful. We have a question actually, Jan. So can AI write code for a process map design for workflow, for example, in financial planning processes?
I think so, but it depends on how obscure the language is. So right now, just now I was working in HTML and JavaScript. So because there's so many examples of these code snippets all over the internet, it was able to learn all of that. But if it's for something that is using a proprietary system, then it wouldn't be able to do it. Or if it's using some technical coding language that is only specific to some areas, that might be something that it has challenges with as well.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I'll just leave you with some final thoughts. So I don't know if you guys are also fans of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So in the movie and the books, there's this little android, Marvin the paranoid android, very depressed all the time, who has a brain the size of the planet, and people ask it to do very simple, mundane things. So he's always very depressed. So and the moral of the story is most of us, we've played around with ChatGPT. Some of us use it in things that we're very familiar with. So I'm sure all of you have workflows that you are always using ChatGPT for. But I guarantee all of us are underutilizing it, right? So a few hours of experimentation can yield a lot of time-saving benefits that you can use in your day-to-day work. So, and I would recommend every month or so, just take maybe one morning out of your week and just experiment with what are the new stuff that has come out. You can just go on YouTube and say, okay, what's the latest ChatGPT tutorial? Or even better, you can think of whatever task that you might want to do and just ask ChatGPT through prompting whether it can do it, right? It's a fun little task to be able to kind of like figure out how far it can go, right? And of course, don't panic. We're all in this together. I always get freaked out that I'll be out of a job because this guy is doing such a great job at all the stuff that I learned. I spent so many years as a human learning how to do. But I think that's not just me. Everyone is on the same boat. So as Douglas Adams says, don't panic. And yep, that's it for me. There's a little exercise for you to do for the LinkedIn group. So it's a very simple exercise. Pick one of these things that I've demoed, either clean a data set, create a chart with Flourish, or create a simple WordPress plugin, and share your results and maybe some musings to the group in LinkedIn.
Wonderful.
Right, over to you, Corinne.
Thank you. And I'll obviously share the homework and send out a copy of the slides to everybody. Obviously, also it's being recorded, and we'll share the recording and the handout. So folks, I want to reintroduce Dylan Salcedo from Rappler. As I've noted in the chat box, please feel free to continue to ask questions of Jan. Please also take note of any questions you would like to put to Dylan. So I'm so honoured to have Dylan Salcedo with us. He's a data scientist from Rappler. Just so glad that you were able to make the time, Dylan. And you're going to be sharing a little bit with us about some of the AI experiments and projects that are underway there. So if you would like to share your screen, you're very welcome to do so. And I know you're going to be doing the same thing of hopping between tabs. So, just feel free to share your screen however you feel will be most useful for everyone on the call. And the answer to Fiona's question is forever. So we have a dedicated landing page for this program and it will stay on the Walkley site. So yeah. Okay, over to you, Dylan.
Thanks, Green, for that. So while I'm doing the share my screen, just a quick thing about like what my role is in Rappler. I'm a data scientist, but I'm under the forensics team, the digital forensics team, which is under the data innovation team. So most likely what I'm going to be sharing first is what we do in forensics. It's very related to AI, but not so of um things like ChatGPT and things like generative AI. I will be presenting it at the end, which is also part of the data innovation team in Rappler. So the first thing that I wanted to share, which is also interesting, is how we get to use a lot of AI, pre-trained AI models. It's not just GPT that has a lot of models, yeah, like things like Midjourney, and even earlier things like other large language models. Um, they're important in our study in disinformation. As you well know, a lot of disinformation online has a lot of um it's literally dirty, but also dirty in a sense that it's a toxic kind of language. So the first thing that we do is we use these kinds of large language models for a lot of data cleaning. Things like detecting the language of whatever text is going to be used for us to use what kind of proper model further down the line. So this is a sample project that we did. Something as simple as this is so widespreadly used that it can be used in an Excel in Google Sheets. You can use like detect language. It's gonna detect whatever language that you're gonna have. You can even use Google Translate already in Google Sheets. That's how fast the APIs already connect to each other. What I want to present here now actually is more importantly in our study with on how attacks against Maria Ressa were surfacing and how these were more an attack on her character as a woman more than that an attack on her credibility. And that was a study here um with ICFJ on how they were able to generate a lot of like these kinds of narratives that can be used in things like topic clustering with natural language processing. This is another story about religion um the attack the online narratives on the Israel Hamas war. Most likely when we got all a sample of these posts, most of these topics, so this kind of topic clustering was done when you parse it through a language model, and it turns out most of these topics cluster into things about religion. So most likely the sentiment online, most of that volume is mostly about praying for as something as simple as praying for peace, but also as viewing the conflict as something of a religious conflict more than that of another kind of conflict. To be fair though, this was early, very very early on, into October last year. Might have the narratives might have evolved by now. So what we were actually looking at now is how these kinds of narratives evolve. And that's it for actually digital. Oh, there's one more actually on how we use entity detection. So this is very important when you have pieces of documents, large documents, and you want to extract what entities are there, things like names, places, organizations. So this study on the martial law cabinet, or the cabinet of our president, was an earlier study even before ChatGPT 3 came out. So we used another model to detect the entities. And this was important because we were able to map out from several documents. So things like news articles or things like other statements and other speeches, we were able to generate something like how the cabinet, so these green ones, are connected to other entities. So maybe this person owns these kinds of companies, and how the previous president, so his father, how his previous cabinet is connected to the current cabinet. So for example, this one, the current cabinet member is a son of this person. So things like that were extracted from these documents. Um, so that's it for the digital forensic side on how we get to study things like this information and how we process information and how we use AI and other machine learning models to derive information and insights from that. The second one, which I think Jan was hinting at a while ago, was on an execution called TLDR. So this is a new feature that we use in our newsroom. And we believe, I think this is one of the first executions in our country on basically trying to summarize articles that you find online. So if you can see here, this is a random article that I've seen that I fished out from Rappler, and instead, it has this whole article, and using an LLM, it can actually provide a summarized version of the article. So to be
Dylan,
ethically,
I'm just
yeah,
going to is that a tool that's available? It's a public facing tool. So I could click on that site right now
yeah,
and click on that button. It would go, yep, here's
yep,
the
yep.
summary. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So any I'm not yeah, I think like most of the articles in Rappler have this icon here. If you click it, you're gonna see like a summary of that article. It's helpful for more long form articles if you want to see a summarized version of it or if you want to see just the gist of it. We do indicate though that it is an AI generated summarization, so as not like to go into like ethical concerns into there. So we still value all of this entire article is still created by a person, so it's still human generated, and this summarization just takes in from the article itself. It can take some suggestions in terms of grammar, all of those other stuff from the large language model it was trained on. Another application of this application is what we call TLDR. It's called TLDR because younger people just say too long didn't read and just want to get a summarized version into it. A derivative of that is using TLDR as an image prompter. So you use this article, you use a certain article as your content or as your entire prompt to the model, and then it's gonna generate like a series of image prompts, and then from there, our graphic artist will then choose from these prompts and use them as layers in their PSD or in their image and generate a composite image. So what you can see here is not it's not 100% AI generated, but layers of it or elements of it, like maybe perhaps the yellow police line, the magnifying glass, and all of those things were suggested by the model, which the graphic artist will then choose. And then they can also layer in original photos that they have to generate this kind of image. It's used for banner images. Oh no, that one, this one. Banner images for most of our articles. Most likely, these are like in editorials, long form contents, and all of those other things that don't require any like real world photos that much. Yeah, so that's the TLDR of TLDR. If you want to know more, you can actually the image generation is actually, it's not publicly available. It's more of a tool for the graphic artists to aid in their design. But you can see the text generation here using this one. Yeah,
So this is an in-house tool, Dylan?
TLDR, yeah, it's an in-house tool, and I think that's what Jan saw, and yeah.
Mhm. Is it something you think you're monetizing to others?
Um, I wouldn't say for now, but what I do know, it runs under OpenAI, so it's an OpenAI product. I am not sure. So like to be um I'm not sure about the terms of how that product is going to be used, but I think it's a nice example of how you can utilize these kinds of tools both in the scale and also in the application of this in the field of journalism, but by also adhering to whatever ethical standards that there need be.
Thank you so much. And just to come back to one of the questions that was asked during Jan's session, how comfortable are you guys that the summaries are reliably accurate?
We actually, well, personally, we actually run into a lot of what we call hallucinations, or like GPT or whatever AI model will suggest is actually wrong. That's why we have a lot of human interfacing. Things like, this part of like the artist actually being able to choose their prompts. It's not just for ethical standards that we want to value the work of the artist, but it also means that we also want to value the veracity of whatever data AI is going to generate. That's why I think the general rule when we use Gen AI, generative AI, is to provide us an array of samples and not just like take a single sample from that and regard it as as Bible truth already.
Mhm. I think before the session when we were testing the slides, Jan, you and I were talking about how, back in the day, you would get into an elevator, but that there would be somebody in the elevator to push the button and shut the door for you. And perhaps if we take a sort of wider view of this, that we're not quite at a point where you can reliably say, yep, off you go, little LLM, I trust you to do what you're doing. Do you want to speak a little bit to that, just with regard to, I know you touched on it a little bit in your final thoughts, but if I was to say I want to write web code completely with AI, what would you say to me?
I would say don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question, right? So, and with particularly generative AI, and Dylan, thanks for pointing out that AI is, such a broad spectrum of things as well, right? So before AI became this buzzword that we all are using in our day-to-day lives, people have been doing AI research for decades and decades, and most people who are data scientists out there are using AI tools that are much more tried and tested than the generative AI tools that are out there, specifically ones that are running on large language models. So if you are using a large language model based AI tool, what I've seen is that if your organization can invest in tweaking the readily available tools into something that is more customized to the needs of your own organization, that's when you kind of get an improvement in in performance and accuracy. So as Dylan said, there are a lot of models out there, even just for generative AI. And so there are some that are completely open source. For example, the one from Meta called Llama. So it's because it's completely open source, you can take it, you can train it with your own data, and you also can kind of go around the limitations of are you using private data and copyright and things like that. And because you're able to train it and work with it to exactly your specifications, then you can give it guardrails so that it's going to be much more accurate and reliable. And if you're scoping kind of the kinds of things that you want it to do, so for example, if you want to use AI to write code to analyze data, if it's particularly going to be working with geographic data, let's say, right? And you're like narrowing down the scope of what you want it to do, then the accuracy will improve because it's not kind of searching over this wide space of everything that is all as ever ingested before and looking only at particular use cases.
Thank you. Dylan, I think that might have been the end of your deck. Was that right? What I wanted to ask you though was when you think about it, I mean, I know you've mentioned having a human interface between, you know, what's happening and then what's going out to the world. If we dug into that a little bit more, how are you approaching that from an editorial process and policy approach? So to the extent that you're comfortable sharing to a public audience, you know, how is this sort of iterating into the way that you're thinking about this from a newsroom workflow and editorial policy perspective?
Actually, we do have what we call Rappler itself crafted something what we call an AI agenda, or like an AI ethics policy that we want to adhere to. I think one of those is that whenever we use generative AI in our content that we publish, we do have to indicate that no, this piece is generate uses generative AI, or things like what I said earlier, like it's not gonna be 100% AI generated. It still has to be, you have choices that AI generates, and then we choose from those choices, and that's where the human interfacing comes into play. Um, uh, Besides that, I think everything else on how fair use is gonna be employed, things like copyright laws is still observed in our newsroom. I can link later actually the entire policy for if you want to read it. And I do believe that a lot of other organizations, not just newsrooms, would be nice to adopt too. Yeah.
I've been collecting those, you know, a bit like going to the beach and picking up seashells, because it's been wonderful to see how many newsrooms are putting their AI strategy, not strategy, sorry, their editorial policy and use approach into the public domain, you know, from all over the world. And I think that's also really you know, useful. It's from big organizations and small ones. I came across one just recently from YLE, which is in Finland. So yes, it would absolutely be wonderful to have any links that you're happy to share with us. And if you're, we'll take it offline, but if you're happy to share a copy of your slides or the stories that you linked to in those, that would be great. Yeah, Jan?
But yeah, talking about links, I also prepared a little Word doc with links to several things that you might want to refer to if you want to dig deeper into these issues. So if I can share my screen again for a minute.
Yes, you can. And meanwhile, I can see that we've also had a link to the Daily Guardian's policies. So I'll pull that out. Thanks, Francis. And I'll pop that into the reading list for today's session. Yep. Sorry, Jan, back to you.
Yeah. So there's two that I think are particularly enjoyable, not informative, but also kind of just a joy to experience. So if you're in the mood for really digging deep into the issues of AI safety and AI ethics, there's a independent creative developer by the name of Nikki Case, and they're based in the US, I think. And they've come up with a very, very long essay on thinking about AI safety and summarizing all the academic literature that's currently out there. And they write in a very kind of whimsical style that makes it, you know, very interesting to read and joyful to follow. So I think the first part is out, and they'll be publishing different parts in the future. So probably by the end of the year, you'll have a really, really long essay that you can really sink your teeth into about AI safety issues. The other is this little short animation from another creative developer who I follow, and it's specifically about large language models, and it's a bit of a critique. He compares large language models to Kanye West in terms of having no what you call metacognition. So he just says a lot of things and has very little kind of awareness of what he's saying. And it's just very a real joy to kind of see a creative IT professional who does a lot of coding and thinks a lot about these issues, coming up with a nice little critique of it.
Thank you so
It's
much.
a 3-minute video. Yeah. And
Yeah.
also for kind of more in depth into like the technical skills, there are YouTube videos that I've linked to here. That is about WordPress, GPT for Sheets, etc.
Thanks so much. And that handout, I'll add the links that we've talked about in this session to that. There's a question here which I'll put to either of you. Are there any other tools worth mentioning that could help with data management or coding? I look at data and code frequently and somehow missed GitHub Copilot. I mean, let's all be fair on ourselves. These things are coming out every 5 minutes. And so it's no crime to have missed something that happened in the last couple of weeks. Yeah. So any other tools that maybe Dylan, have you got some personal favorites? We'll finish up in about 4 minutes. So if anything that you particularly love or want to share?
Actually, honestly, I've only just recently used Copilot, so I'm also, I think, on the same level as most of you, on like exploring all of these things. GPT 4.0 came out a few days ago. I'm still exploring all of those things, so I think we're in for a good ride.
Yeah.
So I think for following all the developments, so when ChatGPT came out, I think for most of 2023, I was trying to religiously follow all developments, and it almost drove me crazy because there's so many things that are coming out, and it's really also gives you anxiety that you're not like up to speed with all that's coming out. So I would say stick to something that kind of does a lot of general stuff, such as ChatGPT, and only when you kind of encounter a lot of limits in what it can do, then try to look at other things. So I know some friends of mine who are also kind of testing it out in their organizations, and after a lot of iterating and using all kinds of different tools, they really kind of optimize their workflows. So for example, they are able to do something with 3 people that used to be done by 25 people. And the 3-person team is even more productive. And they've done stuff like they've trained their own AI agents to onboard new team members and things like that. So you can really go down a deep rabbit hole with all of this stuff. But I would say if you're new to it, just stick to the most common ones. And only when you can start encountering limits, search for new ones.
Thanks so much. Well, we might just gently wrap it up there. I'll mention to everyone that we do have a closed LinkedIn group for this program. I am also similarly playing catch up with quite a few resources and pieces of research that have dropped in the last few weeks, including some that was presented at the International Journalism Festival in Italy last month. So I'll be starting to put more of that into the LinkedIn group. There's always homework that you can do at the end of each of these sessions and pop them into that group for peer-to-peer feedback and some trainer feedback. So I just want to thank our wonderful trainer, Jan Oak from Thibi in Thailand and Singapore, and also Dylan Salcedo, data scientist with Rappler. I'm so grateful to both of you for the time that you spent today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Corinne. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, guys. Okay, well, I'll wrap up now and look forward to the resources in the coming days.